Love is the topic of Bacon's next essay, the fourth of the four essays that I'm going to look here as just a simple sample of the many ways and things that Bacon looks at. Love is the subject of, he is going to begin with the theater actually, but it's the subject of contemporary interest just as much as it was that of the ancient world. And to some degree, it is more the subject of contemporary interest than it was in the ancient world, in large part because the entertainment industry, which presents us with a bevy of images at all points, whether in online, in podcasts or videos on YouTube, whether it's in the pop culture, in its songs, whether it's in movies or whether it's in television. However it is brought to us, the subject of love is presented to us largely in theatrical forms. And there are also a whole variety of self-help books to help you find love, or to help you to take several steps according to some self-help book to find the right mate for yourself. There are all sorts of apps and software and so forth to do this very thing, all of which are tended towards the same end. Please note that Bacon is not giving us a self-help book. He is not presenting a method to achieve what his topic is, namely of love. He is not providing an essay in the modern form. He's not providing a thesis about what love is, which he then seeks to prove in the body paragraphs that follow. He is rather doing what I said before, following the organizing of his thoughts in accordance with the subject at hand. And his subject, the subject at hand, is probably the most important subject that he could endeavor to write about, because love, it is of interest of the greatest of human authors. If all the way from Ovid in the ancient world to Augustine, to Saint Bernard, to St. Paul, to St. John, to our contemporary authors like Leo Tolstoy, or we could come up with some contemporary popular equivalent that I'm not going to bother even mentioning. But love is there in all of them, and it is an important principle, yet very few of them, even when we're looking at those that I've mentioned, are going to do justice to all of the aspects of love. And I would say to you that Bacon is not going to do so either. One book that does do so, this one by C.S. Lewis, The Four Loves, treats it in the discrete ways in which he sees it as emerging in the love that we call affection, which is a form of love, the form of love which we call friendship, much prized in the ancient world, that in the form of eros, and that in the form of charity. It's more likely the latter two that Mr. Bacon is going to treat, that of eros, and that is how exactly he begins this short treatment. But he doesn't do it so directly. He does it rather through the way in which it is brought to our attention, namely through the stage. And so he begins with a typically pithy way of entering into the topic, with an introduction that states the case. I talked about 6 elements of Bacon's essays: an introduction, a statement of the case, an outline of sorts, and then various back and forth proofs and refutations before coming to his conclusion. And these are parts of his essay. Note that they are not 6 paragraphs. They are parts that we can see that hold the essay together. How does he begin it then? By saying this: the stage is more beholding to love than the life of man. In other words, it overstates the importance of love. For as to the stage, love is ever matter of comedies, and now and then of tragedies. But in life it doth much mischief, sometimes like a siren, sometimes like a fury. You may observe. Now, isn't that an arresting way to begin the essay? And pithy and accurate, and it draws us to trust the author with such a judicious treatment as that. You may observe that amongst all the great and worthy persons whereof the memory remaineth, either ancient or recent, there is not one that hath been transported to the mad degree of love, which we see on the stage, which shows that great spirits and great business to keep out this weak passion, which is the way it's portrayed on stage. People are not able to control themselves. And in fact, this is exactly what they are goading us to do, is to give in to our passions. Now, note that Bacon, who believes that the reason ought to rule over the passions, this is part of his understanding of how the heavens relate to the earth and the way kings relate to subjects, and the reason to the passions, there's a hierarchy there. And the passions are something that make us be weak if we give in to it. And this is how it's portrayed on the stage. Now, Bacon is not opposed to the theater, by the way, but he is noting that in the theater, they tend to overstate the importance and influence of love. And we see in a study of history, he mentioned comedies that always treat of love and tragedies that sometimes do, that in history, we find that great individuals do not govern themselves that way. Having stated that and proven his case, as it were, that he now refutes it with counter examples. What do we have? You must accept, nevertheless, Marcus Antonius, the half partner of the Empire of Rome, and Appius Claudius, the decemvir and lawgiver, whereof the former was indeed a voluptuous man and inordinate, but the latter was an austere and wise man. And therefore, it seems, though rarely, that love can find entrance not only into an open heart, but also into a heart well fortified. So he states the counterexample to somebody who is an important historical figure who gave in to love. And he could have brought forward other historical examples as well, but then gives another example, a parallel to that, which will amend what he said even there previously. Now, again, note that this parallelism, this way of contradicting, of drawing parallels, of drawing antitheses, this is a characteristic of the classical mindset that governs Bacon's way of looking at things, and reflects, as I said before, that he thinks that our thinking is the main thing that is illustrated through our words, our minds, which he assumes is a corollary or an image of the mind of God, which is what words reveal. Words reveal and relate to thoughts. Therefore, our reason is operative in those spheres. But therefore, he says that it can also govern a heart well fortified if watch be not well kept. So that's the third thing. So there's an example from Marcus Antonius, a man who gave in to his passions. There is, on the other hand, a rich ruler by name of Appius Claudius, who ended up austere and wise despite being loving. And what made the difference between the two is the latter had good character. But even in the case of a man of good character, if he is not watching carefully, he can be broken down by love. And he says it is a poor saying of Epicurus, the skeptic, satis magnum alter alteri theatrum summus. What does this mean? Each of us is enough of an audience for the other, quoted by Seneca. As if man, made for the contemplation of heaven and all noble objects, should do nothing but kneel before a little idol, and make himself a subject, though not of the mouth, as beasts are, yet of the eye, which was given him for higher purposes. Note that Bacon assumes here that the eye, which is the mind, which is the vehicle through which we see, is also the vehicle through which we should reason, and reasoning ought to draw our eyes upwards rather than downwards. Plato says the same thing, by the way, in his allegory of the chariot. He goes on, it is a strange thing to note the excess of this passion and how it braves the nature and value of things by this, that the speaking in a perpetual hyperbole is comely in nothing but in love. Neither is it merely in the phrase, for whereas it hath been well said that the arch flatterers, with whom all the petty flatterers have intelligence, is a man's self. Certainly the lover is more, For there was never a proud man thought so absurdly well of himself as the lover doth of the person loved. And therefore it was well said that it is impossible to love and to be wise. The source for this statement could be found all over the place in classical sources. It seems a rather stoic sentiment that Bacon expresses here. Neither, he says, doth this weakness appear to others only, and not to the party loved, but to the loved most of all, except the love be reciprocated. For it is a true rule that love is ever rewarded either with the reciprocate or with an inward and secret contempt. This is another aspect of love. Either it is reciprocated or it results in a contempt on the part of the person who is loved for the person who is loving. So it's never greeted with indifference. By how much the more men ought to beware of this passion, which loseth not only other things, but itself. As for the other losses, the poet's relation doth well figure them, that he that preferred Helena quitted the gifts of Juno and Pallas. Now, this is a reference to the backdrop to the Trojan War, because Paris was asked to adjudicate between the three goddesses of Venus, Juno, and Pallas, Athena, which one of them was fairest. And Venus represented love, Juno represented power, and Pallas Athena represented wisdom. Which one of these three is fairest? Well, young Paris chose the gift offered by Venus, namely Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships and brought about the Trojan War, the central figure in the ancient world, at least amongst the Greeks and Romans. And look what happened as a result of that. For whosoever, he says, esteemeth too much of amorous affection quitteth both riches and wisdom. Riches being related to power of Juno and wisdom related to Athena. This passion hath his floods in the very times of weakness, which are great prosperity and great adversity. What are these times of weakness? Great riches, great poverty. Though through this latter hath been less observed. For both which times kindle love and make it more fervent, and therefore show it to be the child of folly. They do best who, if they cannot but admit love, yet make it keep quarter, and sever it wholly from their serious affairs and actions of life. For if it check once with business, it troubleth men's fortunes, and maketh men that they can no ways be true to their own ends. Bacon advocates for, if love be pursued, it must be kept in its place. The private and the public life must not mix. Otherwise, the public life is impeded in a disastrous fashion. And he says, I know not how, but martial men are given to love. We could think of the way Othello is portrayed. I think it is, but as they are given to wine, for perils commonly ask, but perils commonly ask to be paid in pleasures. There is in man's nature, now he talks about human nature. And remember what we said all about the view of human nature here. In man's nature, a secret inclination and motion towards love of others. Could be thinking of Augustine here, could be thinking of many things. The pagan authors will refer to the same thing, which if it be not spent upon some one or a few, doth naturally spread itself towards many, and maketh men become humane and charitable, as it is seen sometimes in friars. And he says this with a witty fashion, because of course friars are supposed to be devout and dedicated to charity. Sometimes they are, he says. Nuptial love maketh mankind. Friendly love perfecteth it, but wanton love corrupteth and embaseth it. Note that he concludes with a trisyndetic tricolon, a three-part comparison: nuptial love, friendly love, wanton love. It's not presented as a climax. He's not moving upwards. He is moving downwards. Nuptial love, marriage love, that of eros, finding its proper mode, the marriage of a man and a wife, that maketh mankind. Friendly love perfecteth it. Here Bacon throws himself alongside the ancient world and seeing friendship as the highest form of love. No self-interest. It's people that are looking at the same object for the same reason. As I say, C.S. Lewis treats this rather well in The Four Loves. I have a lecture of it online. But wanton love, the eros, giving into the passions, he says, corrupteth and embaseth it. Great way to conclude a little essay. Note that he draws to a very witty conclusion what he presents in a very appropriate and witty way at the beginning.